I should be juggling, I can't juggle. So that's not gonna happen. Friends, today we are taking tomatoes because they are in season, because they are ripe, and because they are only delicious really for a small snapshot in a whole year. And we're taking them and we are jarring them up so you can have home preserved tomatoes anytime you want during the season. And you know what? There's multiple ways you can do this. I'm gonna take you through each one of the ways, how the steps work, make it so it hopefully feels easy, and you're gonna be comfortable and confident to do the exact same thing in your own kitchen. Let's go. When it comes to tomatoes, the big thing is you need to peel them usually because you don't want those peels. Now you can can them with the peel on if you don't mind it. I don't want the peel, so I don't do that. So I'm gonna show you the step. It looks multi-step here because I wanted you to see it in front of me so it's easier to talk about. Boiling water, usually I would keep it kind of simmering or boiling. In this case, I have it here so I can just have it all right in front of me. Some ice water, and then something to either peel them right into or actually just dice or chunk, have them, keep them whole, whatever you want. We'll start with kind of an easier sized one here maybe. But what I'm doing is just gonna start by taking my knife and making an X in the top here. So you want ripe tomatoes, obviously, because you want them at peak freshness. What I'm going to do though is just now submerge it in this hot water. So it was just boiling. What that's gonna do in 30 seconds, maybe to a minute, is cook the skin just enough that it slips right off. You know it's ready when it starts splitting and you can see that skin. It's a little hot, but you can see how you can just kind of lift it and it just starts to wrinkle and it pulls away. That's how you know it's ready. So just a few seconds. But to make it more handable, no, not a word, handable, to make it easier to touch so you don't burn yourself, plunge it in ice water, stops the cooking, but it also makes it look, you can pick it right up. So then I take my knife and I have a discard here. Now, we're talking about homegrown, which means they could have bad spots. The core could start looking a little ugly. So we're gonna go in and just take out that core. To me, vegetables, fruit, they're not perfect, and you don't want to just assume they always should be. So what I'm doing is taking out the core and then just peeling off that skin. So since we cooked it, do you see how easy this just comes off? But if there's a bad spot, don't think, oh, I need to throw out the tomato. No. Instead, you're just going to cut it out. That's, obviously I grew up on this farm and we had lots of produce always, and we canned, preserved as much of it as we could. That's how we were able to afford the food we were. And it wasn't perfect. There are bad spots on it. Sometimes there's a worm in certain things. So what I'm gonna do now is just go ahead and slice this up right away into a rough dice. Now, this is not perfect. Really, this recipe, which what I like about it is, it can be for diced tomatoes, it can be for chunked tomatoes. This is what my grandma would have said, chunked. Because back then, diced tomatoes just wasn't really a thing. Can be for whole or half tomatoes too, which usually people like to do with plum tomatoes because they're more of a saucing tomato, but you can do it with any tomato. You can of course do whatever you're comfortable with. I know I'm not teaching best practices here. This is how I pair, how I cut things up sometimes. You do what you're used to, right? In the way your grandma taught you sometimes. But you can do it on a cutting board. What I am noticing, what I like to do is reserve any of that juice that comes out of tomatoes. We're gonna use that too. We don't wanna get rid of any of that flavor. But this is obviously gonna be a little bit of a process, so I'm just gonna keep going through. If I need to, I'll just heat back up my water into a boiling state. I'll put a couple tomatoes in at a time, work through these, and soon enough we'll be packing jars. I just finished doing my dicing, so I'm gonna set this hot water behind me and we can actually just start filling the jars. So we have our diced tomatoes and any of that reserved liquid too. If you wanna cut them on a cutting board, that's completely fine. Just, I like to reserve as much as that liquid from the tomatoes because that's flavor. So I would want to try to capture as much of that as possible. So what I have is my sterilized jars. Always follow manufacturer instructions for that. Sterilize the jars, have the lids and rings ready. I have my water bath ready on the stove too. I like to have everything ready when I'm going to can or preserve anything just because it makes it a more simple process and doesn't then scare you when you get to a certain step and you're not ready and your hands are dirty or whatever it is. So I'm doing this in pint jars. You can do it in quart jars too if you have a larger family. I like to think of it as I buy cans of diced tomatoes, or that's what I'm going to use often. So why not, which are close to a pint. They're not quite a pint anymore. So I'm going to put the funnel on. You can use a spoon, but your hands are going to be clean. This is going to be your best friend, okay? Use your hands if you want to. So I'm just going to start packing the jars with these diced tomatoes. And you can see we're doing a raw pack method. That means we have not heated these tomatoes up, other than taking the skins off. They're not cooked. Sometimes in canned things, we cook things and we have to have them hot. Sometimes like this, we don't. So what I'm doing is putting them in and I'm packing them enough where As I push, I want you to see this. As I push this in, do you see how it's drawing liquid? That raw pack is actually using the liquid with the tomatoes already, and we have some extra if we need it when we're done. And it's creating the liquid needed because you don't pack anything or can anything without liquid. It's very essential. So I'm putting these in and pressing enough that I'm leaving about a 1/2 inch of headspace at the top. That's what you want to leave. And I like to use on this case regular mouth jars as opposed to wide mouth because that shoulder helps keep that vegetable or fruit, in this case tomatoes, where you want it. And see, as I'm pushing, you see how it just comes to the top perfectly. So now I will clean the tops off later, but what I want to show you, get my hand clean, is I always follow USDA guidelines for all canning. Guess what? There's no canning police. No one's gonna come into your house and say, you're not doing it right. And I know a lot of people say, well, my grandma did it this way. My family doesn't do this. That's fine. This is the USDA guidelines for safe canning. And so that's what I'm always gonna show you. So what I do is I do a little bit of citric acid. You can use bottled lemon juice, but that's because it has citric acid in it. And I think the lemon can change the flavor and I don't like that. So I just use a little bit of citric acid, put it right in, which citric acid is not salt. It does kind of sometimes hit your tongue in the same way, but it's not salt. So I also add a small amount of salt, canning salt. If you don't want to, don't. You can buy low sodium or no salt added tomatoes in the store. You can do the same at home. I don't, and I know my salt intake in homemade food, oftentimes it's almost impossible to get too much salt. So I add the salt. So what I'm gonna do is keep going through this, filling my jars, and then we're gonna put them on the stove. You want liquid to cover what you're canning. So you can see when you push down enough, liquid draws, but if it feels like it doesn't quite on one, that's why I use all this reserved juice. So it's just flavor. You're only layering flavor. You're never adding water. And I just make sure I add some of that juice so it's covered. Because that way, when you go to can them, they're covered in liquid, which you need. Now you can push through, make sure you don't have air bubbles. I already pushed through. I'm just making sure they're all covered. And you wanna leave that 1/2 inch headspace at the top. If you overfill, which is a fair mistake because you think, oh, I want to use everything there is, they can bulge the lid and then it's a bad seal. So you don't want to do that. You actually want to follow the instructions. They are there for a reason. So I'm taking some hot water and I am just wiping the top because you'll see you get a little bit of residue on here. That's a little bit of the juice and that could inhibit a good seal. So you want to go around, make sure you clean the tops. After it's clean, you want to then take your lid. I always prepare them in hot water still. I think that's still the manufacturer instructions. You can check. And I take it and I put them on my prepared ones, set them on, and then take your ring. Make sure you can reuse the rings, by the way. After years, you have lots of rings because you can reuse them. Just make sure they're not rusty. You put them on to, I hate to say this because it sounds, what on earth does that mean? But fingertip tightness. And after you do 1 or 2, you understand you don't use the full strength of your arm. That could buckle the lid too. You just do it until you kind of in your fingertips can't go anymore. And so it's fingertip tightness. It's a technical term. I always keep them on a rack-lined baking sheet because it's, one, catches all the drips or anything, but also it's easy then to take them and right over to our water bath, which has been ready. Now tomatoes, they're low acid, so they take a long time to water bath. You can pressure them too. I always think though, water bath is a little bit better of an intro, and for some reason I pressure my beans, my green beans, but I've always water bathed my tomatoes. So there is a rack fitted in the bottom. You want to make sure you have the right equipment because if these jars hit the bottom of a kettle, they could burst. So you need a little rack that keeps them up, and you can buy sets for water baths and things like that. And you want to make sure the water, once they're in here, covers them by about 1 inch because you want them to be fully encapsulated in that water. With the last one in, I'm going to bring it back to a boil. Then I'm going to start timing it, and there's a chart depending where you are on elevation to know how long. Otherwise, we're done. These have been cooking away. I kept them just at a kind of what I'm going to call a low boil, where it was boiling but not so hard that it was coming over, obviously. So then once they're done, you just want to pull them out. Make sure you have all the tools. A jar lifter, obviously. And then I just slightly tip them to get that water off the top. But look how beautiful these are. Now don't be scared if they lift a little bit from the bottom. That's very normal. What's nice about this is you can can things that you're going to use, and I think that's the best part when you can. You want to make it applicable so it just doesn't necessarily seem like a lot of pointless work, but instead seems like work that you're going to love. So when you see, what you notice at first is once they totally cool off, those tomatoes or whatever's in a can will actually drop back down. I know I say canned, and I think a lot of you are like, wait, these are in jars. It's true. For some reason, we call it canning. This is preserving is really what it is, in jars. So what will happen is, as these sit, you wanna let them cool off for about at least 12 to 24 hours. During that time here, hopefully in the next hour, these will cool off and you'll start seeing that these lids start pulling into the center. And then in the center, all at once, you'll hear this pop and one will go down, and it means the air has fully come out of it and it is sealed. So what you do after 12 hours or 24 hours, whichever you wanna do, is come through and don't touch them before. Do not touch them before. You wanna come through and make sure the center is down on each one. If one of them pops back and forth, like you can sit there and kind of hear the pop, 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 just put that one in the fridge and use it in the next week or two. Any of them that are sealed, then at that point, you can take that ring off, make sure the lid is tight. You don't wanna have a false seal, and you can store them away. And you can just keep them in your pantry, just like you would any other canned good. And they're good. I think that's why we call them canned goods, because it's like a can, but it's not. And now they're just ready to go. This is always my favorite part of canning. There's a beauty to it. You could put a leaf or two of basil in this if you wanted to. You could put a clove of garlic in it if you wanted to. You can really make it whatever you want, and that's the best part. So you can take Summer's Bounty when they're at peak flavor, peak ripeness, the best you can get, and you can jar it up and have it all season long for your chilies, for your sauces, for anything that you enjoy. And that's the best part. So what do I hope you do with this? Well, I hope you now feel comfortable and confident to do exactly what I just did. Can tomatoes however you see fit. Maybe you wanna make them as gifts, because what a great gift to give someone. Maybe you wanna make it to save money and to enjoy and know the food you're putting into your body and where it's coming from. Maybe you just wanna do it to try it out. I think any reason is great. Share this video so maybe other people can feel the same way. That's what you want. Share it around so everyone can learn something. Until then, I'm gonna let these cool off and I'm gonna store them away. And I'll probably make something delicious with the fresh tomatoes still. Enjoy.